Hi everyone, it's Jeanette here from the Sewing Studio with another little fun one. I say that every time, I don't need to say that anymore really, it's all fun, isn't it? Now I've grabbed one of my project boxes because what I've been looking at is trying to progress some of my works in progress. And I'm getting there. I think I started the year with 12. I added 3 more to that list, so that went up to 15, but I've had 4 finishes, so I'm down to 11. But this is one that's been in there for a while. And it's something I started a little while ago, and it's probably going to be ongoing for a while yet. Now, let me just pull over my project box, because what I decided to do, and this was back in the day, now if you're anything like me, we bought these things, and they sit in our stash when we had the cake mix recipes. Now, don't worry if you haven't got one of these, because I am going to show you how to do it, how to do these blocks if you haven't got one of these. But if you're anything like me, you may have got one of these in your stash. And what we did with these is, or Moda did with these, is they came out with these sort of papers that you could put on your 10-inch squares to make different elements, to make blocks. And what they gave you on the front was some ideas of some blocks that you could make with what was in the papers or on the papers for these. And this, and let me put it under the close-up, block number 1 was the block that I decided that I was going to make. So I'm going to be doing that. So my idea is when I get a 10-inch square, and I'm going to do it patriotic, so reds and blues, I'm going to put it aside into my project box, and I'm going to make them into these blocks. And that's what I've started to do, but I haven't got very far. But I have been collecting fabric and throwing it in my project box ever since. So let's have a little look at that. As I said, these papers are designed for 10-inch squares, but I'm going to show you how to do the different elements if you haven't got the papers as well. So hopefully we've got all bases covered. So we've just selected some 10-inch squares to have a look at for some ideas. Now, Holly Taylor, one of my all-time favourites, with sort of Christmas fabrics. So we've got a couple of Christmas themes in here. And what I really like about this one is there's the lights and darks that you need in it. Now, to get sort of 42 blocks, you would need more than sort of 1 layer cake, but you can certainly add fabrics from your stash to this as well. But basically you need 2, a light and a dark, or 2 contrast squares for this particular block. So that's the lovely Winter Flurries by Holly Taylor, which is absolutely gorgeous. I don't think you can ever go wrong with a Holly Taylor one. And the other one we grabbed, which was Christmas, and I know Christmas is a little way off, but it's going to be soon upon us. So if we're making, we have to start early, don't we? Joyful Gatherings by Primitive Gatherings. I mean, always another, you can't go wrong with the fabrics. I'd probably say that about most fabric designers, to be honest. But once again, we've got a nice selection. Some nice reds and greens, a little bit different in terms of the colour tones of those reds and greens. I don't know, sorry, how well I'm under the camera there. So just sort of showing you, so we've got that darker green as well as a slightly lighter one in there. And those nice rich reds. A little bit of a brighter red there. And then going on into our sort of lighter fabric. So there's a couple of sort of seasonal festive versions for you. We could, however, go very summery and very floral. We might still want to be working on summer. And we've got these gorgeous ones for that. And so I'm just making sure I'm not quite getting the centre of the close-up, but look at those. Just how fun are those? Absolutely love them. I love all fabric, all styles, all colours. I just love it all. I just love it all. But some really nice ones there as well. So that's Flower Power. Maureen McCormick. Lovely, beautiful. And then we've gone for something a bit more autumn, a bit more fall. Rustic Gatherings, so another Primitive Gathering. So she's got into the spotlight twice here. But these lovely sort of more autumnal, very much more sort of Halloween-y, sort of, as I said, autumnal feel to them. The right blacks there, right at the back, going through more to these sort of rich sort of, they're almost like a sort of browny orange, almost like an ochre colour, and then with some lights in there as well. So I think these blocks would look good, whatever fabric you do them in. So some selections. I think a Christmas one in this, it particularly would definitely look good. So I think if I did it again, Christmas would probably be on my list. So let's open my box. This is the fun bit, isn't it? When you get a project box out you haven't seen for a while. Now you'll see here as well, what I'm doing is saving the fabrics, the papers once I've taken them off. because I can use these for string blocks, so they'll get a second use. So I'm going to pull that one out. I'm going to pull that one out, and you can see in here, this is my box that's got some blocks that are made already, but also my 10-inch squares, or it may be if I've got a piece of a fat quarter that I can get a 10-inch square out of, it's just going in this box. So basically anything red and blue and a light contrast is going in there. So let me just put that one down out the way for the moment. Let's set those to aside because we're going to demo with those how to do it if you haven't got the paper. And we'll just have a look at this. So all you do with these papers, and I say many of us, I know I've got at least another one of those in my stash. We buy these things and then they sit in our stashes, so it's time to get them out and use them. So I think this was a Bumbleberries. I think this is Lewis and Irene, isn't it? Bumbleberries. And I think that, is a Three Sisters. So I've just sort of paired those. So a blue and a white. And then all you do literally is put your paper on top. And I'm just going to pin it in a couple of places. And then these are really simple because you're going to sew. And from each of these papers, you will get one large half square triangle, which is 8.5 inch unfinished, and 4 smaller half square triangles, and they're 4.5 inches unfinished. So that will come from this one paper to layer cake squares or 10-inch squares. And you'll see on here, if I put this under the close-up, I'll do this one first, is they give you the sewing arrows. You literally just follow the dotted line. So it gives you your start point. Let me put that there. Start point where it says there start, and then it's got the arrows, and you just follow the sewing line all the way round. So the dotted lines are the sewing lines, and the solid lines are the cutting lines. So let's just quickly do that one, and then we'll have a look how to do it without the paper. So I've just got my general foot on, and I've got my needle in the centre position. It just gives me a bit more visibility. Now, the other top tip I'll say with these papers, what I tend to do is I just take my stitch length down. I normally piece in a 2.0, but I've actually taken the stitch length down to 1.8. I just find it helps perforate the paper, and it just gives a little bit more of a stronger seam. So I find that's just helpful. Now I'm going to start there, exactly where it says start. So I'm going to put my needle down so I can make sure. And then literally we're just going to follow that line all the way around. I've got one more stitch, I think. Now you'll see I've pinned away from where I need to be sewing, just so that we're not having to stop too much. Now you could sort of carry on sewing there, but I'm just going to start and stop and come in again. Just making sure I'm lining that up. Now I just hand turned that last little stitch because it wasn't quite a full stitch. Now, just before I come away from the machine, I'm just going to check that I've got all the lines. And what I tend to do is just sort of run my finger over it. But yes, I can see there I've got all of those lines. So once we get it to that point, let's put that up there. I'm going to take out my pins, grab our rotary cutter and a ruler, and we're literally just going to cut where it says on all of those solid lines. So that's our first one that's going to take those two up, and then I've got 2 more here to do the outside of the block. And there's just a little bit of waste, but not very much. This, you get about an inch strip. So it actually, if you want to do string blocks, and I think I've been saving them because I'll probably use those papers to put those inch strips onto, and I'll have some nice red and blue scrappy blocks. So there's some, I think they're about an inch wide, those. So that's our half square triangle. Let me just show you this one first. Now what I tend to do is just try and fold that paper back a bit and give it a crease. You can also just sort of run your fingernail over the stitches, and then just be a little bit careful here, because of course we've got a bias edge there. But then all you do literally is, I tend to keep my finger on the seam, and we're just going to peel that paper away. Now I know you can get other brands that do sort of triangles on a roll and all sorts of different things to do different sized half square triangles. So I know this whole idea of foundation piecing onto fabric is not just Moda. There's lots of other, so have a little look. But there you'll see, I'll just finger press that carefully for now because that's a long bias edge. But you can see there, that's our 8.5 inch one. So that's come from those 2 squares. Now let's just cut this other bit. I'm actually going to cut the outside first and then chop them up. But the beauty of this is these should all now be perfectly sized as long as we've sort of sewn accurately and cutting accurately. And I'm just using a line on my ruler as well to make sure that that is definitely a 90-degree angle. So that's one. Oh. That's 2. And that's our 3rd cut. And the same again, I won't take the papers off all of them. Same again, I just tend to either run my finger over that or sort of fold that back, and then keep your, let's do the other way around, keep your finger on the seam line and just carefully tear that paper away. And you want to do it a little bit gently so you don't distort that seam, because there will be some stretch in that seam. So there we are, that's our bit for waste, but that bit, I can cut another smaller triangle out of that and use that for my string blocks. So I'm going to set that one aside. And there's our 4.5 inch square triangle. So if you've got any of those in your stash, they're super easy, super fun to do those with. So let's just put those aside. So from that, as I said, from those fabrics will all match when you do it that way. Now it's quite difficult to do that exactly as we've done it with the 4 small triangles and 1 large one without the papers, but we can still emulate it if you like. So if you haven't got the papers but you like those blocks and you wanted to do this, all I've done on this is I've got 2 lots of 10-inch squares. And you can see here, let me show you those. I think that's a 3 Sisters fabric, and I think that might be a 3 Sisters fabric. Isn't it funny how you can identify your fabrics? So on this one, we could trim it down. We don't need a 10-inch square because those are only 8.5 inches. So technically a 9-inch square would work for this. But as I'm working with layer cake squares, I'm just going to leave it as it is. I could cut an inch off and use it for my string blocks. And if I was at home, I'd probably do that. But for the purposes of this, we will just go ahead. So on this one, I'm just going to do 1 diagonal line, corner to corner. I'm going to put a couple of pins in there, just to hold that together. So on this version, we will get 2 large triangles from one of the fabrics, and we're going to get 8 small triangles, from these fabrics. But in effect, it gives us the same thing. Now on this one, let's have a quick look at these fabrics. I know that's a 3 Sisters one. I think they might be 3 Sisters, and I think they might have both come from a Christmas layer cake. You can see I buy a lot of Three Sisters fabric, can't you? Now on this one, we're going to do 8 at a time, half square triangles on this one. So corner to corner. In both directions, on both diagonals. And on both of these, we are going to sew 1/4 inch away on either side of the diagonal line. Now on this one, I'm going to use a scant 1/4 inch because we're going to have a little bit less to play with. That one I've got plenty, so I don't have to worry about it on that. If I was doing that from 9-inch squares, I would do scant on that as well because it's just going to give us a little bit more fabric to play with. So let's take these to the machine. Right, now I need to switch out my foot because we need 1/4 inch here now. And I'm going to go back up to my normal piecing 2.0 because we're not going through paper here. So it doesn't really matter which we do first. So on this one, I'm going to put my bar of my foot on the line, but because I'm going to go scant, I'm just going to put it just slightly to the other side of the line. Now I'm also going to start on a little piece of fabric because that's starting on a corner. Ooh. I keep forgetting that hovers. There we are, so they're all sewn. So let's take our pins out. And on this large one, we just need to cut on that diagonal line that we drew. And we'll take those to the iron in a minute before we square them up. And then on this one, we need to cut it across the centre, and to make sure we're nice and square, I'm making sure I'm lining it up and going right through that centre point of the two drawn lines, and I'm just looking to make sure that I've got my edges a square there, and we're going to go that direction, and then we're going to go through the centre again. This time I can actually put a line on that centre, and then we're going to cut across the drawn lines. And if you're very careful at not moving your fabric, you should be able to keep it all together and just cut. So from that, we've got our 8. So we can put 4 of those with one of those large squares, and the other 4 with the other large square. So let's just press one of these back, press one of those back, and then we can give them a trim. Look how nice that is. And I press both of those seams under the darker of the 2 fabrics. So let's just square up this small one first. So I've got a little 6.5 inch square up ruler here. And then what I'm going to do is make sure that that 45-degree line that's running through the centre of the ruler is along that centre line. And I'm just checking to make sure 4.5, I can get 4.5 all the way around. I like to trim all 4 sides. Some people just sort of do 2. If you've got a fairly sort of straight side, sometimes you can get away with 2. And then I'm going to just flip that around. And now I can put my 4.5 inch lines on the edge of the block and make sure that diagonal line is running right on top of that seam. And we can trim, so you can see we've only got tiny little bits coming off of that one. So in this method we do need to square up, so that's that one. And let's get the 8.5 ruler out and do the same again. Now we should have plenty on this because that's my 8.5. So, but the same again. So I was just double checking it was definitely an 8.5 inch ruler. I don't know why I was doubting it. Now I'm going to try and do it and leave as much fabric here as I can because I might be able to string piece that. If it's big enough. And what I like about this one is you just need to go around the edge of the ruler. But once again, I'm just checking that that 45-degree line is running up through. Move the ruler. Ooh, move the ruler again. I'm getting excited because my block's nearly finished. Look. There we are. So if you don't have those papers, we can still do that using the 2 at a time method for the large half square triangles and the 8 at a time for the smaller half square triangles. Once again, that's 8.5 unfinished, they're 4.5 unfinished. So that's another scrap quilt for me to do, but say layer cakes, if you don't want to do it scraps, definitely just grab yourself a layer cake and you can have a quilt in no time. So I hope you enjoyed that. I hope you give it a go. Have a look through your stash to see if you bought any of those, and like me, they were sort of just sat there languishing, weren't they? But now they'll get some use, and they'll get a double use again for some half square triangles from some string blocks as well. So thank you very much. I hope you enjoyed that, and I hope you'll join us again here next time in the sewing studio.